I stood at the edge of the garden, just beyond the gleaming marble columns that framed the founder's memorial. The air was crisp, the grass freshly trimmed, and the sun was beginning to dip behind the horizon, casting a long shadow over the ceremony. But despite the serene beauty around me, a cold, familiar ache settled in my chest. It wasn't the place I was expecting to return to. 10 years. 10 years of silence, of absence, and here I was, staring at a memorial dedicated to my father, the founder of the company that once meant everything to me. Only now, the marble slab that had once borne my name, my legacy, was blank, erased, just like I had been. My brother Marcus stood on the stage, his figure regal in a sharp suit flanked by our mother and younger sister Eliza. They were poised, untouchable like they always were, perfectly composed in a way I never could be. I should have been up there too, standing beside him, sharing this moment. But the seats were full, save one, my seat. I was a ghost in this room, invisible to the people who were supposed to be my family. No one turned to look at me. Not Marcus, not Eliza, and certainly not Mom. I took a slow breath, my eyes scanning the crowd of corporate executives and high-powered guests, their smiles as bright and fake as the polished floors beneath them. They were all here to celebrate my father's memory, but they were too busy cheering for the man who had replaced me, the man who had erased me. The plaque at the front caught my eye. Beloved father of Marcus and Eliza. No mention of me, not a single word. My name had been scrubbed from this history. A clean slate, with nothing left to remind anyone of the woman who had once been an integral part of this place. I swallowed hard, fighting back the sting behind my eyes. How could they do this? How could they just pretend I never existed? I turned to leave. There was nothing here for me anymore. But as I moved toward the gate, my eyes landed on Petra Yao. She was one of the senior executives, a woman who had once been my closest ally in the company. She stood by herself, her gaze focused on the stage, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. She noticed me then, her eyes widening in shock. Adriana? My breath caught. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the pavement as she made her way toward me. I thought for a moment she might ignore me, pretend like I was just another passing shadow. But she didn't. Instead, she walked straight to me, her face softening with an expression I hadn't seen in years. She was the only one who acknowledged me, the only one who recognized my presence. "You're here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loud would ruin the fragile moment we were sharing. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I wanted to say something, anything, to tell her how much it hurt to see everything I had built, everything I had fought for, shattered in front of me. But the words stuck in my throat. "I'm sorry," she continued, her eyes searching mine. They did this to you, didn't they?" I finally found my voice, though it was rough, hoarse from years of silence. "I never thought it would come to this." My eyes moved to the memorial again, the one place I was supposed to be honored. I built this company just as much as they did, and now they've erased me. Petra stepped closer, her hand gently resting on my arm. "You're not erased," she said, though her words felt hollow against the weight of everything I had lost. "You're still here." A wave of frustration bubbled up inside me. "Am I?" I asked bitterly, my voice cracking. "Am I really still here, Petra? Because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like I was never even part of this." I was shaking, not just from the cold, but from the overwhelming need to scream, to demand answers from the people who had taken everything from me. But I couldn't. I couldn't do that here, not in front of all these strangers who only saw me as a mistake to be swept under the rug. But Petra wasn't a stranger. "Adriana," she said softly, pulling me out of my thoughts. "You need to know something. They can't erase you. Not really." I met her gaze, waiting for her to explain, to tell me how I could fight back, how I could reclaim what was mine. But she just gave me a knowing look, her jaw set tight. "Your name might not be on that plaque," she said, "but that doesn't mean you've been forgotten." A slow, bitter laugh escaped me. "Then why does it feel like they've wiped me out of existence?" Before Petra could answer, Marcus's voice boomed through the speakers, calling for attention. I glanced back at the stage, my chest tightening as he smiled, his words smooth, rehearsed. "We're here today to honor the legacy of our father, the founder of this great company, a legacy that will continue to grow under the leadership of the Kale family." I couldn't listen anymore. I couldn't stand to hear him talk about my father as if he had been the only one to ever matter. as if I didn't exist. Without another word, I turned and walked away, my footsteps echoing through the empty garden. But Petra's words stayed with me. They couldn't erase me. Not yet. And somehow I was going to make sure they never would. The quiet hum of the elevator was the only sound as it descended into the depths of the corporate headquarters. The building had been my father's vision, a place that had once felt like home. Now, as the door slid open, I couldn't shake the feeling that it had become a mausoleum, filled with echoes of a past I could never reclaim. I wasn't sure what had drawn me here today. Maybe it was the desperation to find some piece of my father's legacy, some trace of the life I had once known, or maybe it was just the fact that I had nowhere else to go. I stepped out of the elevator and made my way down the familiar corridors, each step heavier than the last. The building was still pristine, still glittering with the success my father had built, but it felt hollow now. I had been part of this once. No, I had been its heart. Or so I had thought. But now, as I moved through the halls, it felt like a museum where I was nothing but a forgotten exhibit. When I reached my father's private study, the door creaked open with a sound that sent a chill down my spine. The room was unchanged. His old desk was there, stacked with papers I had once helped organize, the chair behind it as grand as ever. My fingers traced the familiar contours of the wooden desk, the smoothness of it still comforting in a strange, nostalgic way. I hadn't expected to find much, but Emily, my sister, had given me a hint, a quiet, almost secretive suggestion. "You should check the drawer, Adriana. I think you'll find something there." The drawer was locked, but that didn't matter. I had the key, a small brass thing that had once been in my father's pocket, one he'd always said was for important things. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now I felt a strange pull to use it. I unlocked the drawer with a soft click and pulled it open. Inside, nestled among stacks of old papers and forgotten files, was something I didn't expect. A thick stack of handwritten letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. My heart skipped a beat as I sifted through them, each one marked with a date from the years I had been gone, years I had thought were simply forgotten. I sat down on the chair behind the desk, my hands trembling as I opened the first letter. "Adriana," it began, my father's familiar looping handwriting filling the page. "I know you don't agree with the decisions I've had to make, but I hope one day you'll understand why I've done what I've done. I've always believed in you, more than you'll ever know. But sometimes the choices we make, no matter how much they hurt us, are the right ones for everyone involved. I only wish I could have been more open with you, but I know you would have never accepted it. You are too proud, too independent for your own good." I paused, my breath caught in my throat. What was he talking about? Why had he never sent these? The words burned like acid, each one a reminder of all the things I had never known, all the secrets I had been kept from. I kept reading. "Your mother's refusal to understand only makes things harder, but I see in you the same strength I saw in myself when I built this company from the ground up. You'll lead this one day, Adriana, I have no doubt about that. But not if you don't open your eyes to the reality of this world. There are no easy paths to success, only the hard ones that we make." At the bottom of the letter, my father had written something that made my heart stop. "I'm not sure if you'll ever get this, but know that I'm proud of you. Always have been, and always will be." The words felt like a punch to the stomach. I swallowed hard, fighting to keep the tears at bay. My father had never told me this, had never said any of it in person. Why hadn't he sent these letters? What had he meant by "you'll lead this one day"? Why had he kept them from me? I moved to the next letter, my fingers still shaking as I turned it over. It was dated just a few months before my disappearance. The words felt like they were meant to shatter me. "Adriana, I've made a decision. I've signed a document naming Marcus as my successor. I know you will never agree with me, but it's the only choice I have. He is the one they'll listen to, and in the end, that's what matters. I hope in time you'll understand why." My chest tightened, the blood rushing to my ears. My father had named Marcus as my successor, not me? Had my brother known? Had he been part of this? I felt the heat of betrayal rise up in my throat, choking me. This was the reason I had been pushed out. This was the reason they'd erased me. But then, underneath the succession document, something caught my eye. A transfer authorization. The kind that looked official, the kind that was meant to be filed away with records. I slid it out carefully, my fingers trembling even more as I read the details. It named me as the intended successor, co-signed by my brother Marcus. But it had never been filed, never been submitted. I was staring at the final unfinished piece of the puzzle. I wasn't just erased, I had been actively excluded. My father had chosen me. But Marcus, the same brother who had stood on stage earlier, had made sure the document was never filed. He had made sure I would never have the chance to lead. I was nothing more than a name crossed out on paper. I leaned back in the chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. My father had been gone for years, but the truth was even worse than I could have imagined. The betrayal was deeper, darker than I ever realized. My father had set everything in motion for me. He had wanted me to take over, but Marcus, my own flesh and blood, had worked to bury me. And now, I had the proof. This wasn't just about the company, it was about family, about the lies they'd fed me for years. And now I had to make them see me, make them realize that I wasn't going to let them sweep me away again. I stood up, clutching the letters in my hand, my pulse quickening with a new sense of purpose. The game was just beginning. The hum of the elevator felt oddly comforting as it descended into the basement, into the heart of the corporate machinery. It was dark down here, the fluorescent lights flickering every few steps, casting long, wavering shadows across the concrete walls. This place felt like a tomb, a forgotten graveyard of information, records, and data long out of sight. But today, it wasn't just any forgotten data I was searching for. It was mine. Petra was beside me, her face set in a grim expression. I could see it in her eyes, the same determination I had felt the moment I first laid eyes on those letters. She wasn't just helping me anymore, she was with me. She understood now. She knew exactly what I was up against. The door to the server vault was heavy, locked with a combination only authorized personnel could access. But Petra had the clearance, and the access code was already typed into her phone, blinking on the screen as she glanced at it. "Ready?" she asked quietly, her voice steady but laced with a certain urgency. I nodded, though my throat felt tight. I had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was finally here, I wasn't sure if I was ready, if I could handle what I was about to uncover. The vault door opened with a deep, metallic groan, revealing rows and rows of high-tech servers, blinking red and green. The vast space was cold, the hum of the machines filling the air as we stepped inside. I tried to ignore the unease creeping up my spine. We were about to uncover the truth, my truth. Petra moved to one of the terminals, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she pulled up the company's internal network. She was quick, methodical, and far more at ease in this environment than I ever would be. "Let's find out who decided to wipe you clean," she murmured, more to herself than to me, as the screen flickered to life. The search didn't take long. A few commands, a couple of clicks, and a series of logs appeared. Petra's eyes narrowed as she scrolled through them. I leaned over her shoulder, my breath held in anticipation. I had already seen the letters. I had already seen the succession documents, but now I needed the proof, the undeniable, irrefutable evidence. And there it was. My heart sank as I saw the red flag on the screen, a series of actions, timestamps, and usernames that made my blood run cold. "Here we go," Petra said softly, tapping a few more keys. "This is it. Your file. Someone deleted it, then brought it back, only to erase it again." I stared at the screen, the shock hitting me like a punch in the gut. It was all there, clear as day. My file had been accessed, edited, and then removed. Not once, but twice. Each time, it was Marcus's username that appeared. Mikhail07. Marcus. My brother had actively worked to erase me, to keep me from even being part of the company's history. I had suspected as much, but seeing it in black and white, the cold, undeniable evidence made my stomach churn. The betrayal hit harder than I had ever imagined. Petra scrolled further, her fingers moving more urgently now. "Let's see who authorized the redaction." A few more keystrokes and a voice log popped up. Petra opened it, and I immediately recognized the voice that came through the speakers. It was low, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. "Keep her in the dark," the voice said, sounding almost amused. "The less she knows, the longer we keep control. It's easier this way, trust me. We can't have her coming back into the picture. Not now." The voice was unmistakable. It was Marcus. Petra looked up at me, her eyes wide with shock. He planned this. He didn't just erase your records. He manipulated the system to keep you out, to make sure you never came back." I felt a wave of nausea rush through me as I stared at the screen, the weight of the evidence settling on my chest like a 100-pound stone. This wasn't just about a company. This was about my family, my brother, someone I had trusted. The one person who should have supported me had been working against me the whole time. I could feel the anger rising in me, simmering beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. But I swallowed it down. I had to stay calm. I had to stay focused. "Can you get a timestamp for when this was done?" I asked, my voice tight. Petra nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard again. "Yeah, it was just a few weeks after your father passed away, right after he was supposed to be preparing you for succession." I nodded, the pieces clicking together. Marcus had waited until my father was gone, until there was no one left to hold him accountable. And then he had erased me. Systematically, methodically. "I'll make sure this gets out," I said, my voice cold and controlled. "I won't let him get away with this." "Not now. Not ever." Petra gave me a quick, knowing glance before her fingers hit the final key. "I'll help you, Adriana. Whatever it takes." I stood there for a moment, staring at the screen. My father's words from the letters echoed in my mind. "You will lead this one day. I have no doubt about that." But Marcus had tried to bury that. He had tried to make sure I would never have the chance to lead, and now I had the proof to take him down. "This isn't over," I whispered, more to myself than to Petra. Not by a long shot. She looked at me, her expression unwavering. "No, it's just beginning." And with that, I knew. I was ready to take back what was mine, to take back the life they had tried to strip away, to make them remember who I was, and who I always would be. I could feel the tension in the air as I sat across from the retired compliance officer, Greg Foster. We were in a small, nondescript coffee shop on the outskirts of the city, far from the polished glass towers of the corporate headquarters where everything was carefully hidden behind smiles and boardroom decisions. Greg's graying hair and creased suit made him look every bit the part of someone who'd seen the darker side of corporate life, someone who had witnessed the games people played with power and money. I wasn't sure what had brought him to me. We'd only spoken once, years ago, when he was still working at the company. But now, here we were, having coffee in an almost surreal, quiet understanding. "Adriana," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial as he leaned in. "I've been watching what's been happening with your family, and I think you need to know something." I nodded, my fingers tapping lightly against the ceramic mug, my mind racing with the possibilities of what this could be about. I had a feeling it was something big, something I hadn't yet uncovered. Greg glanced around the cafe as though checking for any eavesdroppers, before he slid a small manila folder across the table. I hesitated before opening it, but I could already tell this was a turning point. Every step I'd taken had led to this moment, to finding the financial records and tracing the trail Marcus had left behind. I opened the folder. Inside were a series of bank statements, wire transfers, and what appeared to be spreadsheets detailing large sums of money. My eyes quickly scanned the documents, but the numbers, millions of dollars, jumped out at me. "This," Greg said, pointing to the documents, "is the fund that was supposedly earmarked for philanthropy, for your father's charitable projects. Only problem is, it wasn't spent that way." I looked at him confused. "What do you mean? This looks like a legitimate fund. My father was passionate about giving back to the community." Greg's eyes hardened. "What you don't see on those statements is where the money actually went. It was siphoned off, transferred to shell companies, multiple accounts. The kind of operation that only someone like Marcus could pull off." I felt a cold rush of blood drain from my face. Shell companies. It was a term I was familiar with from my work, but never in a million years did I think it would be tied to my brother, my family. "Marcus?" I trailed off, almost too stunned to speak. "Yeah," Greg continued. "And this started shortly after you were reassigned. When they made sure you were disappeared from the company, they started shifting money, millions of dollars, into these fake accounts. Some of it went overseas, not just for charity, but for other things, investments, loans, the kind of things that are easier to hide if no one's watching." I felt the weight of the world drop onto my shoulders. Marcus hadn't just removed me from the company, he'd been manipulating the finances, draining it in the process. It wasn't just personal, it was systematic. The money that was supposed to benefit others had been funneled into his own pockets, into secret ventures. "I knew something was off," I muttered, running my hand through my hair. "But I never thought it was like this." Greg nodded grimly. "It's a classic setup. Use your influence, get the funds, make it look legitimate. The problem is, Marcus had a lot of help, some of it from people who've long since left the company. But the trail leads straight to him. He's been covering his tracks, covering yours, covering everything. I sat back in my chair, the overwhelming realization settling on me like a fog. This was bigger than I'd thought. The betrayal ran deeper than I'd imagined, and Marcus wasn't just trying to erase me from the company's history. He was building an empire on the back of my father's legacy, all while hiding in plain sight. "Do you have all the proof I need?" I asked, my voice cold. "Everything I'll need to bring this to light?" Greg slid another sheet of paper toward me. It was a transfer authorization document, one that I immediately recognized. It was the same form my father had signed when he planned to make me his successor, except this one had been altered. Marcus's signature was on it, co-signed, but it hadn't been filed. It was a dead document, one that no one would have noticed had Greg not found it buried in the financial logs. "There it is," Greg said, watching my face as I absorbed the truth. "Marcus made sure it never went anywhere. He ensured that you wouldn't have the authority. He made sure he had control." I felt the anger rise in my chest, sharp and raw. My father's final decision had been overridden. My brother had undermined everything and no one had even noticed. But now I had everything I needed to make it known. "Marcus," I muttered again, this time with venom in my voice. "He's been using this company as his personal playground, hasn't he? Stealing from the very people my father wanted to help." Greg didn't answer, but his silence said everything. I felt like I had been hit in the chest with a hammer. Not only had my brother erased me from history, but he had actively worked to dismantle everything my father had worked for. And the worst part? He had done it all while hiding behind the company's supposed reputation for integrity. "I need to make this public," I said, standing up and clutching the folder tightly in my hands. "I need to expose this. I won't let him get away with this anymore." Greg nodded, standing with me. "You'll have the full support of the board if you go forward. But be careful. You're playing a dangerous game. Marcus won't let go easily." "I don't care anymore," I said, my voice hardening. "It's time for him to pay." I left the coffee shop with the evidence in my hands, and for the first time in years, I felt the fire of determination rising inside me. This was no longer about the company or even the money. It was about taking back what was mine. It was about making Marcus see the truth, about making him face the consequences of his actions, and I was ready for whatever came next. The war had only just begun. I stood in front of my childhood home, my fingers brushing against the rough wood of the front door, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and dread. The house had always felt like a safe place, until it wasn't. Now it was a reminder of everything I had lost, of how I had been pushed out, erased from my own legacy. And yet today, I needed to come back. I needed answers. The house was exactly how I remembered it. The white shutters were chipped from years of sun and rain, and the front yard had the same scraggly hedges my father had once insisted on trimming himself. It all felt suffocating, too close to the memories of a time I thought I had left behind. But today, I wasn't here for memories. I was here to dig for the truth. The door creaked open as I pushed it, the familiar scent of old furniture and leather filling the air. The place felt empty, too empty for a house that had once been so full of life. My mother had long since retired to a life that kept her away from the past, content in her role of being a spectator in her own family's history. Marcus had long since taken over. And Eliza? I wasn't sure where she stood anymore. The door to my father's study stood ajar, the brass nameplate still hanging on the frame. I didn't need an invitation. I walked in. The room was exactly how I remembered it, lined with mahogany bookshelves, the same desk that had once commanded attention, the same leather chair my father used to sit in every night when he worked late into the evening. I never thought I'd step back into this room again, not after everything that had happened. But here I was, searching for answers. I approached the desk slowly, feeling the weight of the past pressing down on my chest. Everything that had mattered to me, my work, my future, my family, had been taken from me, and it all started here, in this room. I opened the drawer I knew so well, running my hand across the familiar cold metal. There had to be something hidden in here. There had to be something that explained why my father had left me in the dark, why Marcus had systematically buried me from the inside out. And then my fingers found it, the latch on a hidden compartment just behind the desk drawer. I hadn't known about it when I was younger, but I'd overheard my father once mentioning it to Marcus, joking about where the real secrets were kept. I pulled open the compartment with trembling hands, knowing that whatever I found in there would be the final piece of this puzzle. There was an envelope worn with age, the edges fraying as I pulled it out. It had no markings, no address, just a name, Adriana. I opened it with cautious fingers, the paper crackling as I slid it free. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a legal document. I scanned it quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. Succession order. My stomach dropped. This was it. This was the document my father had never delivered, the one that had been buried under layers of deception, the one that would have made everything different. I read it again, my fingers shaking as I saw the bold words at the top. This document certifies Adriana Kale as the successor to Kale Industries upon the passing of the founder, Samuel Kale. She shall assume full leadership of the company and oversee the operational and financial decisions effective immediately following the founder's death. This is to be executed by the appointed board of directors and is considered legally binding. I could hardly breathe. This was my father's final wish. I was meant to lead, not Marcus. I was the one who was supposed to carry on his legacy. The weight of the paper in my hand felt heavier than any burden I'd ever known. But then, below my father's signature, there was a second one, a signature that made my blood run cold. Marcus Kale. My brother had co-signed the document, but it wasn't filed, it wasn't executed. It had been hidden, buried in this compartment for a reason. And now, I had the proof. My hands trembled as I held the document, my mind racing. Marcus had known about this. He had to. He had made sure this never saw the light of day. He had systematically erased me, and now I could see it all laid out in front of me. I let the document fall to the desk, staring at it, unable to process what it meant. Marcus had not only taken my place at the head of the company, he had taken everything. He had controlled my fate, manipulated our father's wishes, and kept me in the dark. All these years, I had thought that I was the one who had lost. But now, I knew the truth. Marcus had engineered my erasure, from the company, from my family, from everything. And it wasn't just about the company anymore. This wasn't just about business, it was personal. He had taken what should have been mine, and I was done letting him get away with it. I stood up abruptly, the paper crinkling in my hand as I looked around the room. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me, something sharp, something powerful. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not this time. I slipped the document into my jacket pocket, knowing exactly what I needed to do next. Marcus was about to face the consequences of his actions, and I wasn't going to let him hide behind his lies any longer. I walked out of the study, my mind made up, my heart burning with determination. I was going to take back what was rightfully mine. I was going to make them all see me again. And this time, they wouldn't be able to erase me. The conference room was packed. Every seat around the polished glass table was filled, the air thick with the tension of unspoken words. Even the walls of the room seemed to close in on me, reflecting the sense of claustrophobia that had gripped me the moment I had walked in. The board of directors sat at one end, their faces unreadable, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and guarded concern. I had expected them to be cold, but now that I was facing them, I wasn't sure whether I was nervous or angry. All I knew was that I had to be composed. This wasn't just about my reputation anymore. This was about the truth, and Marcus needed to face it. Marcus sat at the head of the table, his posture impeccable, his sharp suit a mirror image of his polished, controlled demeanor. Beside him was Eliza, my younger sister, her eyes flicking between me and the board, clearly torn. But she didn't matter, not now. The only thing that mattered was that I finally had the upper hand. I had come prepared, too prepared for any of them to dismiss me as a disgruntled sibling trying to tear down a system that had worked for everyone else. I had the documents, the bank records, and the voice recordings from the server vault, everything I needed to expose Marcus for what he had done. I set the manila folder down in front of me with a firm thud. The sound echoed through the room. I saw a few board members glance at it, then quickly avert their gaze as if anticipating what was inside. I took a deep breath. This was it. "I think it's time we get to the truth," I said, my voice steady but filled with resolve. "And I think you'll find that the truth has been buried far deeper than any of you realized." I took out the documents one by one. First, the succession order signed by my father, and then the second signature, Marcus's. I slid them across the table toward the board, watching as their eyes shifted between the paper and my brother. I could see the recognition in their faces. They knew something had been wrong, but they didn't know what. "This," I said, my gaze fixed firmly on Marcus, "is the document that should have been filed." The document that would have made me the successor to my father's company, the one that would have placed me in the CEO's chair, legally and rightfully. Marcus shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. "This is a family issue, Adriana. It's not a matter for the board," he said, his voice calm, but I could hear the edge of panic lurking beneath it. "You know the board supported me. We agreed that it was best for the company." "Oh, really?" I shot back, voice rising just enough to catch everyone's attention. "You agreed, Marcus. Not we. You. You didn't want me in the picture, did you? You saw me as a threat, and you buried the document. You made sure it was never filed. You've been erasing me from the company since the moment I disappeared." I could see him faltering now, his usual confidence cracking. The moment of truth was here. The silence in the room thickened, the weight of what I had just exposed sinking in. "I have everything," I continued, turning my attention to the board. "The financial records, the shell companies Marcus set up, the funds he diverted, money that was supposed to go toward charitable causes, toward the legacy my father had built. All of it was funneled into these accounts, and some of it was even funneled overseas." I took a deep breath and let the information hang in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. "I have the proof. Marcus didn't just take the company from me. He's been siphoning money from it for years." I looked directly at Petra, sitting at the end of the table, who had been the one to help me uncover everything. She met my gaze, her eyes flicking toward the board before she nodded. "I helped Adriana trace the money," Petra said, her voice cutting through the tension. "And it's all there. The transfers, the accounts. Marcus was using his position to funnel millions into private accounts. Accounts that are hard to trace but not impossible." Marcus's face twisted in frustration. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice cracked as he tried to maintain control. "You don't know what you're talking about? You think you can just come in here and ruin everything? This is my company now. Our family's company. And you," he pointed a finger at me, his face flushed with anger, "you've been nothing but a problem from the start." I stood up slowly, my heart pounding but my posture unwavering. "I've been a problem? You're the one who buried me, Marcus. You're the one who orchestrated everything to exclude me. You're the one who manipulated everyone around us for your own gain." I looked around the room, my eyes locking onto each board member. "You've all been complicit in this in one way or another, and you can't pretend that you didn't know something was off. This is your chance to do the right thing." I turned back to Marcus, watching as his face turned pale, the color draining from it. He opened his mouth to speak again, but the words caught in his throat. "This isn't over," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "You can't do this. You'll ruin everything." "I'm not ruining anything," I said, my voice calm but fierce. "You are, and the truth is coming out whether you like it or not." I turned to the board members again. "You have a decision to make. You can stand with him, or you can stand with what's right." The room was still. No one moved for a long, painful moment. The weight of the situation settled heavily in the room. The board was composed of professionals, but now they were staring at the consequences of their actions, the true cost of letting Marcus operate unchecked for all these years. Finally, one of the board members, someone I had worked closely with in the past, leaned forward and spoke, his voice low. "I think it's clear that we need to conduct a full investigation." I felt a rush of relief, but I didn't let it show. "And I will be here to make sure the truth comes to light," I said, "because I won't stop until justice is served." Marcus slammed his fist on the table, but no one flinched. He was losing control, and for the first time, I didn't feel sorry for him. The board members exchanged looks, some hesitant, some resolute. The tide had shifted, and they knew it. The moment Marcus had feared, the reckoning had come, and I had finally found my voice. "It's over," I said quietly, looking Marcus straight in the eye. "You can't erase me anymore." And with that, the room was no longer just a place of power. It was a battlefield where Marcus had finally been exposed, and I was going to make sure the world knew the truth. The drive to the safe house felt surreal. The city outside the car window blurred past, the familiar streets suddenly unfamiliar, like I was on the edge of a world I hadn't recognized in years. I wasn't sure what to expect from the man I was going to meet, but I knew this was the final piece of the puzzle. If Petra's data and the financial trail had given me the proof I needed, this man, this former board advisor, was the one who could confirm the final, damning detail that would shatter everything Marcus had built. The safe house was tucked away in an unassuming part of town, a place where secrets were kept. When I arrived, I parked on the street a block away and walked to the address, keeping my head low, my steps quick. No one had seen me coming. Not yet. I rang the doorbell, the sound of a muffled voice calling out before the door creaked open. The man who stood in front of me was older than I had expected. A few years beyond retirement, with sharp, calculating eyes that still held the remnants of someone who had once been in control. He was dressed in a simple, faded sweater, his hair thinning on top, but his presence still carried the weight of someone who had witnessed more than his fair share of corporate power plays. "Adriana Kale," he said, his voice gruff but tinged with recognition. "I never thought I'd see you again." I nodded, stepping inside quickly as he stepped aside to let me in. The room was dimly lit, sparsely decorated, an attempt at comfort, though it felt more like a holding cell than a home. He motioned to the couch and I sat down. He didn't offer me a drink or small talk, just took a seat opposite me, watching me with that sharp, assessing gaze. "I'm glad you came," I said, not wasting any time. "I need you to confirm something for me." He nodded slowly, folding his arms across his chest. "I'm sure you've pieced it together by now. All those years of lies, manipulation. Marcus never did play fair." I leaned forward. "I need you to tell me what you know about the changes my father made just before he died. The ones that Marcus buried. The succession order that Marcus never filed. He made sure I wasn't in the picture, but I need to know how far he went. What else did he manipulate?" The man let out a slow breath, his eyes narrowing as he seemed to consider how much to reveal. Then he spoke, his words heavy with regret. "Your father trusted Marcus. Too much, in my opinion, but that's the way he was. Always wanted to keep family close, even when it wasn't in the best interest of the company." He paused, rubbing his chin as he thought. "I was part of the board when that succession order came through. It wasn't a surprise to any of us that your father wanted you to take over. But what Marcus did," he trailed off as though gathering the courage to say it. "I need to know everything," I pressed, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Marcus did more than just bury the papers, didn't he? He did something to ensure it wouldn't ever see the light of day." The man nodded slowly, his lips pressed tightly together. "He knew the board would never approve of you. You were too independent, too vocal. Your father was counting on you, but Marcus knew how to play the game. He convinced enough of the board members to back him. But there was one thing your father didn't anticipate." "What was that?" I asked, my heart racing. "He invoked your father's name without permission. He manipulated the situation, used your father's signature to rewrite the will and override the succession plan. There was a clause that your father had put in place for situations like this, a safeguard, but Marcus had it wiped clean." I sat back, stunned. The betrayal ran deeper than I thought. He had done everything he could to make sure the board and everyone around them thought my father had wanted him, not me. And he'd used my father's name, my father's legacy, to bury me further. "And when that wasn't enough," the man continued, his voice low, "Marcus found a way to bypass it. He took out all references to you, made sure no one would even think to check the records. He had the backup system scrubbed. Made sure no one could trace the changes back to him." "Why didn't you say something?" I asked, my voice sharp with frustration. "Why didn't anyone speak up?" He sighed, his gaze dropping to the floor. "There's a price for speaking out in that kind of world. You know how it works. I was in no position to take on Marcus. And I wasn't the only one who saw it happening, Adriana. There were others. But they kept quiet. We all kept quiet. It was easier that way." I shook my head, disbelief mixing with anger. Easier, so we just let him get away with it? He erased me, he erased my father's wishes, and everyone stayed silent? "I'm sorry," he said quietly, finally meeting my eyes. "I know it's not enough, but it's the truth. I never wanted this for you. Marcus isn't who you think he is. He's manipulative, ruthless, and he's been playing everyone for years." I looked at him, trying to absorb everything he had just told me. This wasn't just about family anymore. It wasn't just about a company. It was about my father's legacy, my legacy. And Marcus had buried it all for his own gain. He had been playing this game from the beginning, and I had never known. I took a deep breath, standing up from the couch. "I can't just let him get away with it," I said, my voice firm. "I've already waited too long." The man watched me with a mix of pity and approval. "Be careful. Marcus will stop at nothing to protect what he's built. But you've got the truth now. And the truth is, The most dangerous weapon you can wield. I nodded. I've already started. I'll make sure Marcus answers for everything he's done. The man gave a small nod in return. I'll help you if I can. But once you go down this road, there's no turning back. I know, I said, my voice resolute. But I'm not backing down anymore. It's time everyone knows the truth. I left the safe house with the final piece of the puzzle, feeling the weight of the truth settle on my shoulders. I had what I needed. The board was already starting to question Marcus's decisions. The financial trail was leading right to him, and now I had the evidence that would tie everything together. It was time to bring the house of cards down. I wasn't just fighting for the company, I was fighting for my future, for my family's name, and for the legacy that Marcus thought he could erase. And I would make sure he knew exactly what it meant to try and bury me. The lights of the TV studio were blinding, but I didn't flinch. I wasn't here to be seen. I was here to be heard. I stood in front of the cameras, the interviewers' questions echoing in the background, but my mind was far away, focused on the only thing that mattered now: the truth. This wasn't just any expose. This was my expose. It was my chance to take back everything Marcus had tried to steal from me. The company, my father's legacy, my place in this world, all of it had been ripped away. But now I had the chance to rip the veil of secrecy off Marcus's empire of lies. The cameras flashed, their harsh light throwing shadows across my face. But I didn't mind. I'd spent too many years in the shadows already. I was ready to step into the light, even if it meant exposing the darkest truths. Adriana, the interviewer, Sarah, said, her voice smooth but clearly tinged with curiosity. You've come forward with serious allegations about your brother Marcus and his role in the financial discrepancies at Kale Industries. Can you tell us, in your own words, why you decided to go public with this now? I looked directly into the camera, the weight of the moment pressing on my chest, but my voice was steady. I didn't want to do this. For years, I stayed quiet. I stayed in the background, hoping that maybe I could work my way back into the family, back into the company. But after what I discovered, after seeing the proof of how my brother not only buried me, but also used my father's legacy for his own gain, there was no way I could stay silent anymore. Sarah nodded, but I could see the glimmer of skepticism in her eyes. This wasn't just an average family dispute, it was corporate treason. I could feel the weight of her doubts, but I wasn't about to let them stop me. What do you mean when you say your brother used your father's legacy? Sarah asked, clearly fishing for specifics. I took a breath, flipping open the folder I'd brought with me, filled with every piece of evidence I had painstakingly collected. I've got the documents right here. My father, before his death, left a signed succession order that named me as his successor, not Marcus. I had the legal right to take over Kale Industries, but Marcus made sure it was never filed. Instead, he manipulated the situation, altered records, and kept me out of the picture entirely. He even went as far as to remove my name from company history. Every reference to me was wiped clean. I slid the documents across the table toward Sarah. She glanced at them, her eyes flicking between the papers and the camera. I also have the financial records, I continued, showing how he used the company's funds that were supposed to be used for charitable causes, to line his own pockets. Millions of dollars funneled into shell companies laundered through overseas accounts. It wasn't just about power for him. It was about greed. Sarah leaned back, absorbing what I had just laid out for her, for the world to see. Her expression shifted from professional to something more personal, genuine concern, maybe even a little disbelief. You're saying that your brother not only erased you from the company's history, but also embezzled money for personal gain? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my eyes hard. That's exactly what I'm saying. He buried the truth because he was afraid. Afraid I would take back what was mine. And he knew that if the world saw the real story, if they saw the lengths he went to in order to bury me, they'd see him for what he truly is, a fraud. Sarah took a moment before asking, but what about the board? The other executives? Were they unaware of what was going on? Not entirely, I replied, shaking my head. I've spoken with former board members and insiders who've confirmed that they were either complicit in the cover-up or too afraid to speak up. Some of them are just as guilty. They let Marcus do whatever he wanted, turning a blind eye to the things he was doing behind closed doors. I could see Sarah processing everything, her brows furrowing as she realized the full scope of the situation. And now, with all this evidence, you're saying you're going after Marcus? Yes, I said, the determination in my voice clearer now. I'm going after him in every way possible, legally, publicly. He can't hide anymore. He's going to be held accountable for what he's done, for destroying my father's legacy, for stealing what was rightfully mine. I leaned forward, making sure my words landed. And it's not just about Kale Industries. This is about justice. It's about making sure the truth is known. It's about making sure that no one else ever gets to erase me again. The room fell into a heavy silence. Sarah was visibly moved, clearly aware that this wasn't just about business. It was personal, it was raw, and it was about reclaiming something far deeper than corporate power. But Adriana, Sarah said, her voice almost apologetic, don't you think this will tear your family apart? I mean, Marcus is your brother, your mother, your sister. They've all been part of this. How can you expose him like this? I didn't flinch. They were part of the cover-up, yes, but they were never part of the solution. My family chose their side and I chose mine. I chose the truth, and the truth is stronger than any of them. There was no turning back now. The decision had been made and the path forward was clear. I wasn't just reclaiming what had been taken from me. I was exposing a rot at the heart of the company, and Marcus wasn't going to escape this. Not after everything he'd done. Thank you for your time today, Adriana, Sarah said, her voice still carrying the weight of everything we had just revealed. And I'm sure the world will be watching closely as this story unfolds. I nodded, standing up as the cameras clicked around me. Let them watch. Let them see exactly who Marcus is. As I walked out of the studio, my pulse quickened. This was just the beginning. The media was already picking up the story and the leaks had already started. Soon, Marcus's empire would crumble under the weight of the truth. But as I stepped into the cool night air, I couldn't help but feel a sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I felt free. The world would know what he had done, and I would make sure he couldn't run from it. This was just the beginning. The room was colder than I expected. The air in the hearing chamber felt heavy, thick with anticipation, as if every person in the room was holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable storm to arrive. And it was coming. Fast. I sat in front of the committee, my eyes steady, focused. The board members sat at their long, polished table, their expressions a mix of professionalism and something else, uncertainty. They were uncomfortable. I could feel it. They knew what was at stake, and they knew, too, that the truth was out there now. And once it was out, nothing could stop it. At the head of the table, Marcus sat across from me, his face hard as stone. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles in his neck ripple with every shallow breath he took. He was trying to maintain control, but I could see the cracks beginning to show. He wasn't the man he used to be, standing tall, exuding confidence. Now he was the one on the defensive, and for once, I was in control. The head of the committee, a stern-faced man named Richard Westbrook, cleared his throat as he reviewed the papers in front of him. He looked over at me, then back at Marcus, then back to me again. His voice, when he finally spoke, was measured, as if carefully weighing every word. Miss Kale, we've reviewed the evidence you provided, he began, glancing at the file I had handed over earlier, and the allegations you've made are serious. These documents, they show clear evidence of financial misconduct, unauthorized redactions, and most disturbingly, the manipulation of the company's succession order. You're claiming that Mr. Kale, Marcus, was directly involved in the alteration and subsequent cover-up of the documents that should have made you the rightful successor to your father's company. I nodded slowly, not breaking eye contact with Marcus. Yes, that's exactly what I'm claiming. And it's all right here, I said, gesturing to the pile of evidence in front of me. My father's wishes were clear. He wanted me to lead this company. Marcus erased that, and not only that, he's been siphoning funds, using shell companies to launder millions of dollars that should have been used for philanthropic projects. This isn't just about me, it's about the entire company, its reputation, and its future. Marcus shifted in his seat, his face flushing red with anger. This is absurd, he snapped, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. You're trying to destroy me to destroy everything I've built. You think these baseless accusations will hold up? You've been gone for years, Adriana. You've got nothing. This is just your personal vendetta. But his words didn't have the same force anymore. They didn't carry the weight of authority that they once had. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke, and his eyes darted nervously around the room, as though looking for a way to escape the truth. I stood up, my posture straight and unwavering. I'm not here for personal vengeance, Marcus, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm here for justice. Justice for the company, for my father's legacy, and for the people you've manipulated and deceived over the years? The board members exchanged glances, and I could see their uncertainty begin to shift. The air had changed, the tension palpable as they finally began to grasp the full weight of what was happening. Marcus wasn't the golden boy anymore. His empire of lies was crumbling in front of them, and there was no way to spin this. Richard, I said, turning to the head of the committee, you need to listen to what I'm saying. This isn't a personal feud. It's about exposing the rot at the heart of this company. Marcus has been using his position to manipulate everyone around him. He's been stealing, covering up, and erasing me. Not because I was a threat, but because he was afraid I would see what he was doing. And now, we can't let him keep getting away with it. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You have no idea what you're talking about, he shouted, his voice breaking. This is all just an attack on me. You don't even know what you're doing to this company. If you think this will end well for you, think again, Adriana. You're playing a dangerous game. I looked at him one last time, my gaze hardening. I'm not the one who's been playing games, Marcus, I said quietly. You have. And now you're going to pay for it. The room was silent for a moment before Richard spoke, his voice low and measured. Mr. Kale, these are serious allegations. We will conduct a full investigation into the claims made by Miss Kale. The board will reconvene in 24 hours to discuss further actions. In the meantime, I suggest you prepare yourself for what's to come. Marcus's face twisted in fury as he sat back down, his hands trembling as they gripped the edge of the table. The board members looked at him, some with pity, others with suspicion. But none of them were looking at him the way they had before, not with reverence, not with blind loyalty. Now they saw him for what he was, a man who had betrayed them all. Richard turned to me, his expression softening slightly. Miss Kale, thank you for bringing this to light. We'll take it from here, but we're grateful for the evidence you've provided. I nodded, feeling a cold rush of relief flood through me. Thank you, I said, keeping my voice steady. And I'll be here ready to testify if you need me. As I left the room, I could feel the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. Marcus had been exposed, and now the investigation would begin. There was no turning back for him. No matter how much he tried to deny it, the truth was out, and he would have to face the consequences. As I walked down the hall, I felt a surge of satisfaction. This wasn't the end, not yet, but it was the beginning of the end for Marcus. The first step in taking back everything he had stolen. And this time I wasn't going to let him erase me. Not again. The headquarters of Kale Industries had never felt so quiet. The vast open floor was empty, save for a few employees working late into the night. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was a stark contrast to the energy that had once filled these halls. But today, it wasn't just an office building. It was a symbol of everything I had fought for. The place where I had been erased and where now I was finally stepping into my rightful place. It had been a long, hard road since the hearing, and even longer since the day Marcus thought he could bury me. The board had completed their investigation, and the results were damning. Not just for Marcus, but for everyone who had been complicit in covering up the truth. The financial trail I had uncovered, the testimony from insiders, the redacted documents, it all added up to one conclusion. Marcus was out. The media had erupted, reporting on the scandal in waves, the story of a family's betrayal and the corruption at the heart of one of the largest companies in the country. Leaks had surfaced, confirming everything I'd exposed. Investors had pulled out, public trust had eroded, and Marcus's grip on the company had shattered. The board had no choice but to reinstate me as the rightful successor. I had been waiting for this moment. I walked into my father's old office, the one I had spent so many hours in as a child, watching him work late into the night, his mind consumed with building something lasting. I had never imagined that I would return to it like this. My name, finally back on the door. I had my own desk now, my own place in the corner of the room. The leather chair creaked beneath me as I sank into it, looking at the view from the massive windows. The skyline stretched out in front of me, the city twinkling beneath the soft glow of the setting sun. For a moment, I allowed myself to take it all in. This was mine now. I didn't do it just for myself. I did it for my father, for the company he had built, the legacy he had left. I had spent so many years questioning whether I was meant to lead, whether I had the strength, the skill, or the drive, and now I knew. I was ready. The door to my office opened with a soft knock, and I looked up to see one of the younger engineers standing in the doorway, nervous but eager. "Miss Kale," he said, his voice tentative, "the board is ready for your speech." I smiled and stood up, smoothing down my blouse. "Thank you, Jake. I'll be there in just a minute." I walked to the door, taking one last look around the office that had once felt like an impossible dream. It was time to make my mark. I walked down the hallway toward the conference room where the meeting was being held. The board members were already seated, their faces a mixture of wariness and respect. I had earned their trust, though not without a fight. And now it was time for me to lead. Not as the ghost they had tried to bury, but as the woman who had fought to reclaim everything that was rightfully hers. I entered the room, and all conversation ceased. The room fell silent as I made my way to the head of the table. I paused for a moment, glancing at each of them. Petra was there, sitting at the far end, her eyes locked on mine with a hint of approval. She had been my ally through this whole process, and I couldn't have done it without her. But today, the stage was mine. I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of the moment settle in my chest. Thank you everyone for being here. I know this has been a difficult time for Kale Industries. We've been through a lot, more than any of us could have anticipated. And I know the road ahead won't be easy, but we have an opportunity here, an opportunity to rebuild, to regain the trust of our employees, our investors, and our community. I paused for a moment, taking in the room. Their faces were attentive, focused. There was no more doubt. The board, though hesitant at first, was now willing to follow me. This was my company now, and they knew it. "I want to make one thing clear," I continued, my voice strong and unwavering. "Kale Industries will be a company that values integrity above all else. We will rebuild with transparency, with respect, and with accountability. The mistakes of the past will not define us, but we will learn from them. I will not make the same mistake my father made in trusting the wrong people. I trust each and every one of you to help guide this company into a new era." I glanced at Marcus's empty seat at the table. He had been ousted. His influence was gone. I didn't take pleasure in it, not anymore. I had fought for this company, not for revenge, but knowing that I had finally put an end to his reign, knowing that he could no longer manipulate anyone in the room, gave me a quiet satisfaction. "But this is not just about us," I added, my gaze shifting to the window behind me, the city stretching out below. "This is about our people, about the families who rely on us, the engineers, the designers, the workers. We are a part of this community, and it's time we remember that." A quiet murmur of approval rippled through the room. Petra gave me a small nod of encouragement. I turned back to the board. Kale Industries will be built on truth, on transparency, and on integrity. If we can do that, we can regain everything we've lost. I stood there for a moment, letting the words sink in. This was my legacy now. Not just my father's, not Marcus's, mine. And as I looked around the room, I saw the respect in their eyes. They understood. They were ready to follow me. A new chapter had begun, and I would make sure it was one we could all be proud of. The door to the conference room opened, and I walked out with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to face whatever came next. The next generation of engineers and leaders would look up to me. They would know what it meant to stand strong in the face of adversity, to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. As I passed the hallway on my way to the elevator, a young intern, barely more than a kid, caught my eye. He was holding a folder, his eyes bright with excitement. "Miss Kale," he said, hesitating for a moment before speaking, "can I ask you something?" I smiled, stopping to listen. "Of course. What's on your mind?" He hesitated again, but his voice was full of wonder as he asked, "Was it worth it? All the fighting, everything, was it worth it?" I looked him in the eye, feeling the weight of everything I'd fought for. "I'm still standing," I said simply, my voice steady. "That's how you know." And as I stepped into the elevator, I realized something. It wasn't just the company that had been restored today. It was me. And I was going to make sure I stayed standing for as long as I needed to.